Hello, and welcome to this SAP Stay Current video series on SAP Data Hub 2.3. My name is Richard Leblanc. In this four-part video series, you'll learn how to model data ingestion pipelines with SAP Data Hub. In this second video, we'll have a look at the Python2 operator and see how we can use it to invoke the text blob Python library to perform sentiment analysis on the product review files from HDFS. In the previous video, we used the read file operator to read files from HDFS, and we used the wiretap operator to output the file names to the browser to ensure the correct files were being read. Now let's add the sentiment analysis processing to our pipeline using Python. We'll start by searching for the Python2 operator and adding that to our canvas. As you can see, there's a Python2 operator and a Python3 operator. For our purposes, the Python2 operator is what we need. By default, this Python2 operator has no ports, no input ports, no output ports. So there's no way to get data into that operator or for that operator to send data to a downstream operator. So our first step is to add an input port. So we'll give it a name. We could give it any name. We'll call it input. And then the type for this port, meaning what kind of data it will receive, is a message. And we want this to be an input port. So we'll be receiving messages from a connected operator. So we'll click on OK. Now that we have this input port, we can go ahead and connect our read file operator. So connect the output port of the read file operator, this out file, which outputs the contents of the file. And we're going to connect that to our input port of the Python2 operator. So this will send the contents of the file to our Python2 operator for processing. The next thing I want to do is change the label for this operator. So I'm going to click on the configuration. I open this and I'm going to change this to sentiment analysis to better reflect what it is that this operator is actually doing. I'll go ahead and close that configuration. Now our next step is to open this script window by clicking on this script icon. By default, this operator contains some sample script that we're going to change with our own custom Python script. So I'll go ahead and select all of this and replace it with our custom Python script. As I scroll up, you can see that this Python script consists of multiple different functions. The first function we'll look at is this parse review body. What this function does, it basically takes the contents of the file, which is one big string, and it splits it up into multiple lines. Every time it sees a line break, it basically splits it into a different line. The next function that is of interest to us and that does most of the interesting work is this parse review function. This parse review function is called for every line in the file, and it does a few things. First, it parses the line and splits it in two, with one part being the product ID and the other part being the product review. The product review is going into this text variable, And then that product review is used as input to invoke the text blob library. Once this processing is done, it then builds a return message that consists of an ID, which is our product ID, MD5, which is a hash that is used for uniqueness. We'll need that when we load that into Vora. The length of the product review, the text of the product review, and finally, the two most interesting pieces is the polarity, which indicates whether the review was positive, negative, or neutral. And then the subjectivity, which indicates a feeling, right? For example, I really love the product, or I really don't like the product. So that is the subjectivity. The final function that I want us to look at is this onInput function. The parse review body and the parse review is Python code that you would basically get from a data scientist. Okay. Meanwhile, this onInput function is very specific to Data Hub. This is necessary in order to be able to communicate with upstream operators that will send messages to this operator, and then to communicate with downstream operator the results of the processing. So if we look at line 67, this is where we link the port, which is called input. That's the port that we created. We gave it that name input. And it invokes, so there's a link between that port and the onInput function here. So what this is doing, it's saying every time a message is received by this input port, it will invoke this onInput function. So it will perform the code that we have here. Okay? And in here, it does some processing. It calls our parse review body, which invokes our parse review function. And then it takes the result of those functions, and then it's going to send it to a port called output. This is something we haven't done yet. It'll be our next step for our pipeline for our sentiment analysis operator in our pipeline. So we'll go ahead and close this script window, and then we'll right click on our sentiment analysis operator and click on add port. Here we'll give it a name of output, just like we had in our Python script, and we'll set the type as message. And here we'll select that this needs to be an output port. Go ahead and click on OK. And so now we've connected the read file operator to our sentiment analysis operator, and we've set up an output port so that we'll be able to send the results of the processing that occurred in this operator to another downstream operator. The last step in this second video is to further define the runtime environment for our sentiment analysis operator. In the Python script, we are referencing the text blob library. We need to add a link to the text blob library. So we'll go ahead and right click on our operator and click on group. So now our sentiment analysis operator is part of a group. And this allows us to configure the runtime environment. And how we do that is by adding a tag. So we'll go ahead and click on our plus sign here to add a new tag. And then we'll scroll down to go find the text blob. And we'll specify version 0.12.0. By doing this, it basically makes the text blob library available to our sentiment analysis operator. So we'll go ahead and close this configuration. I'll click on this icon here, the auto layout, to make everything look nice. So that concludes all the steps that we had for this second video. To recap, we added the Python2 operator to our pipeline that we renamed sentiment analysis. We then added an input port to this operator so that we can connect the read file operator to our sentiment analysis operator. We added our custom Python script to our operator. And we also added an output port so that the results of the sentiment analysis will be able to send those to a downstream operator that will connect in an upcoming video. The last thing we did, we added the sentiment analysis operator in a group so that we could connect it to our text blob library for its runtime environment. In our next video, we'll complete this first pipeline by adding the Vora Avro ingester operator to persist the results of the sentiment analysis in SAP Vora.